Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. In this video, I want to answer the question, how do you mix a record? Which is a pretty broad question, but I think I'm going to give it a go. So if you were to ask this question to the general public, or maybe to a group of musician friends or something like that, you would probably get answers along the lines of things involving setting levels, EQ, compression, reverb, that kind of stuff. And I want to say that that's more like the how you accomplish the actual mix. Those are the individual processes you use to get the mix together, but that's not really how you actually mix a record. I think that how we mix a record actually happens in our head, and that all that stuff with level balancing and EQs and things like that are all means to get to what we've created as the image of the record in our minds. So this should be a very interesting video because in my personal opinion, what I'm going to discuss here is probably the most important advice and best advice that I've ever offered in regards to mixing here on the channel. Probably will be the best that I ever offer in the future, and might be some of the best advice that ever really could be out there in regards to how to mix a record. Which also makes me think that this is probably going to be one of my least viewed videos. It should be interesting to see how the views in the comments come together. But basically, these are going to be the gems that will give you the information you need to be truly great at mixing. By the way, I also want to point out that this was produced by Josh Richens, who's here on the channel, so it's really cool to be doing a record that he produced, so should be interesting. So, okay, so how do you mix a record? What I want you to do in a moment is pause this video, and I want you to get a pen, and I want you to get a notepad or a piece of paper or something like that. Now, this is not my first time filming this. This is my third take, so I'm not going to need to take the notes as we play this down. But as I play down this record, I want you to take some notes. And I want your notes to look like this. I want you to have the first note be about the intention of the record. What do we think the artist is trying to communicate? What do we think the meaning of the record is? What does the sound of the record tell us stylistically, genre-wise? What does it remind us of? This is not necessarily a literal thing. Everybody might have different answers on that. It's not a right or wrong. So it's just, what are you getting from the record? What's the point? What's the purpose? The second thing that I want to get going is two separate lists that kind of interplay. One is a list of the things that we really, really love about the record and or the song. And that should be our longest list. So really focus on the things that you think are working and sound great and really get you interested in the record. And then we want another list that kind of counters that, which is things that need to improve. Not necessarily things that are bad, but just things that aren't working. So we get that going. We're going to get those lists, and then we're going to compare them. So pause this video, get your pen, get your notepad. I'll give you a second. That's about a second. Cool. And now we're going to listen to this record down. I'm going to play it out a little bit longer than I usually play examples on this channel, but I really want to give you time to actually write your list out. All right, here we go.
Come twist me like licorice. Another night, another hit. I need to get some sleep, but in my brain a replay of all the days I was in a haze. It's funny how these things creep in. Oh, I try
before we get to our lists, I want to mention that in our process of mixing, the very first and most important thing, and this is going to sound so obvious when I say it, like duh, the first thing we need to be doing is listening. When you're a mixer, you're not a professional level setter. You're not a professional EQer. You are a professional listener. That is so important. Just even this is the third time shooting this video because I wanted to get my information across correctly, and I'm still getting new ideas as I'm listening. My mix of this is improving because I'm listening to it more. If I listen to this enough, I can get the entire mix in my head before actually even touching the DAW. So let's compare some lists. All right. For intention, this should be interesting. I wrote coming of age, ? Something about the first kind of gang vocal section felt like, something about the chords and melody felt like a coming of age story and reminded me of that. Stylistically, I wrote down pop punk early 2000s-ish, and that was really very cemented when we heard the verse. And I think then those two ideas kind of came together, and for me, I usually visualize like what the music video would look like, or what a movie about the record would look like, and I wrote down late teen road trip. There's something about this record that feels like older teenagers just transitioning from being kids to adults. You know, a bunch of friends go on a road trip and they learn about themselves and they grow, right? So to me, those are the intention points. That's the feel and the emotion. Now, you might have a completely different list, and that's fine, because one of the beautiful things about music is that music can express things to us where we don't necessarily have a why. I can't really tell you exactly why this makes me think of like a coming of age story. I don't know what it is, but it's just something about it gives me that energy, and it might give you a completely different energy. That's one of the beautiful things about engineering, is that we can have different ideas about what the music is expressing. What's important is that we just know what those ideas feel like to us, so that we can then communicate those ideas when we're making all of our decisions. So why do we do this? The intention is so important because every moment in a mix, we're going to be making very small decisions. Do I want the snare up? Do I want the snare down? Do I want the kick up? Do I want a little bit more attack from the kick? Do I want the kick to be softer, rounder? And there's very rarely like a specific right or wrong to those answers. Like sometimes there's something that's objectively better, but that's pretty rare. Most of it's going to be subjective. So if we know what the intention of the record is, or we believe we feel the intention of the record, we're going to be able to use that as a beacon. So like one of the things I wrote down was probably go dryish in the verses. I don't think that I want a big reverb in the verse. Could I make a reverb work? I sure could, but maybe it's going to be better to keep it dry and preserve some of that early pop punk 2000s-ish kind of attitude, right? So that's going to help us make our decisions. Once we get into the EQ, the compression, and the levels, those all work toward that, and that's what makes them great. Now, I recommend doing this process, finding the intention, from the rough mix. In this particular case, I don't have a rough mix. I just have the multis that Josh sent, but that's fine too. You can do this just by listening to the multi-tracks as well. Okay, now let's compare the list of things that we love, things that we really like. And I have a quick aside about this. I think audio engineers in general, maybe even musicians in general, have this propensity to lean toward the negative. We focus only on the things that need to be fixed and improved, and I don't think that's a good way to get a great record out. Because if we're always just giving our energy to the negative, at best we're going to get to something that's okay. Because we haven't paid attention to the things that are great, all we've done is correct the things that are negative, we just get to something that sounds average. If we really listen to the things that we like, and sometimes we have to find it, admittedly, we have to search for things that we like about something, but if we really get our mindset into what do we like about this, and we really put the energy toward that, even if we kind of don't fix the things that need improvement, it could still be great. Because we're playing into the strengths of the things that make the record captivating and interesting and exciting and give the listener something to fall in love with. So, okay, my list here. First, I said strong contrast between big group to small solo vocals. I'm a big advocate of strong contrasts. That's very much in this record, so I want to make sure that that's preserved in the mixing process. Second thing I wrote down was distortion. because I love distortion, but in particular, Josh's distortions that he's baked into the sounds, I really, really like them for two reasons. First is that they all kind of get along. The colors of everything seem to have a nice blend. Even though they're all different distortions. And the other thing is that it's a range of distortions. Some of them are like heavy saturations, some of them there's actual like square wave stuff happening and breakup, but they all have this very distinct uniqueness to them, and it never sounds like fake or forced. It feels like it's all really well thought out and well felt out. So I want to make sure that these distortions are highlighted. I definitely don't want to clean them. I want to do the opposite in a way. I sort of want to make it obvious that it's there because they're really well done. Groove. I probably could have written a little bit more about that, but I think what I meant by that was that there is a distinct push and pull in between like the guitars and bass and like the drums. So it's like the guitars will kind of fall behind and then they'll jump ahead. They'll fall behind and jump ahead, but which is not always a good thing, but it's being done in a way where it doesn't feel accidental. It feels like the moments where it's behind kind of like lull you in and allow it to feel warm, but then the moments where it's ahead kind of provide some excitement, and it's happening so fast that it just ends up really giving us a lot of the groove and the drive. So when I'm doing my compression, my EQ, my level setting, I kind of want to make sure that that groove is standing out. I don't want to do anything that would diminish that. So like one of my immediate thoughts is that maybe the drums could be a little bit louder, just to kind of help set, they're very metric, so to set that metricness and then allow the guitars and bass to kind of play off of it and make that more obvious to the end listener. I wrote bells in second intro because I noticed them in the second intro, but then actually while I was listening this time, I wrote guitar rising melodies, bell rising melodies in intro. And I didn't notice it before, but in between the gang vocals, there's all these kind of rising guitar melodies. The guitar's not out. It's not like it wasn't there, but like a melodic concept from the guitar will sort of show up. And then the next time that same concept shows up, it's in the bells. And so that kind of like trading of melodies, I can enhance that through automation and making sure that the end listener gets that trading of melodies. And I think that's going to be really important to the success of this record and the success of this mix. And I also just wrote performance. I think everything's really well performed. I don't think I'm going to have to do any like hiding of performance tricks. A lot of times when we're working with bands, sometimes there might be a guitar player who's got something where the tone is maybe not quite in or the groove is a little off and we kind of have to hide things a little. I'm not hearing any of that there. So we can have everything nice and exposed and clear, and it's going to be great. All right. Now let's talk about the things we need to improve. I have a short list, actually. One thing that I wrote down was EQ curve dull, more bite on drums. Just in general, it feels like it's a little bit overly warm, I think. So it could be as simple as even just going to the mix bus and cranking up a little treble or cranking up a little upper mids. But I think that the overall tone curve could kind of spark to life a little bit. Pretty simple. Uncoordinated. So what I meant by that was that we have this big contrast, right? Unfortunately, it's such a big contrast that stylistically it almost feels like two different records happening. And while I like that in a certain way, I still want it to feel connected. I still want all of the tones to feel like they belong in the same song. So I'm going to have to actually really work at that. I'm going to have to do some careful decision making because I want to preserve the contrast, but at the same time, I want it to feel like we haven't changed records. Sometimes that could actually be okay. I just don't think that this song is asking for that. And the third thing that I wrote down was acoustic and piano, small, disconnected. That was a very specific one that I also noticed on this listen here. I'll play just the acoustic guitar and the piano part. Actually, I should note that there is a gentleness that I want to preserve, so I'm going to put a note there. Preserve gentleness. Right? But I think that there needs to be something there that could maybe make them feel a little bit fuller sounding and maybe a little bit more connected in terms of tone. Which actually brings me to a really good point, which, why this advice is so important. Why this is what makes the difference. Because we could have all of the EQ techniques in the world. We could have all of the compression techniques in the world, all of the reverb techniques in the world, and that's important stuff. Hey, look, it is. I sell tutorials on it. Like, I do believe it's very important. But if we don't know what we're trying to do with those techniques, how are we ever going to get it right? There isn't necessarily a single prescribed technique that's just a catch-all that's going to work for everything. It has to be what we envision from the record. And on the flip side of it, I should also mention, even if we don't have techniques, even if you're if you're absolutely foolish and you've never bought a Weiss Advice tutorial, oh, I'm gonna get killed. It's okay, because if we know what we want, we can try 1,000 different things, and as long as we know what we want, eventually we'll find that thing that gets there. And even in this case, you know, like, okay, so the acoustic guitar and the piano need to feel bigger. So what are some ways we could do that? We could do it with EQ. So I could pull up some of the low mids on the piano. I could push some of the center mids, like 600, 700, 800, 900 on the guitar, where like the melodic color of the guitar lives. I could push those up and find a good level balance, and that might give us a really good blend that sounds really big. I could send them off to the same bus and use like a saturator that makes them feel fuller. I could connect them through some kind of a reverb return that makes the sound bigger and more colorful. There's a lot of different techniques that I could do. I don't know which one's going to work. I don't know if any of them are going to work, but I know what I want from the sound. So if it works, I'll know. And if it doesn't work, I'll know. And I'll try something else. So having this vision is actually really the heart of where the mix lives. And the better your vision for the record is, the better your mix will be. So I go through this stuff with Weiss Advice members pretty much regularly. We do webinars about weekly, and almost every webinar, when I'm working on a record, it's usually a record that I've been hired to mix or recently mixed. And I do this exact exercise again and again, where we listen to the record and we write down our ideas, or we just get our ideas in our head and we share those ideas and discuss them. Because these ideas, this is the part of the mix that actually counts. And everything else, all the techniques, very useful for getting to that vision, but if we don't have that vision, we will not get there. So I'm going to wrap it up on that note. If you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. Mixing with Reverb is out. It is currently 20% off if you use the code REVERB20. That is going to be good until February 15th. There will be a link to that in the description box below. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.